Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another webinar here on Food Industry Executive. We're super excited to have you all here today. And before we dive in, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, please just drop those into the questions panel and we will address them at the end of the broadcast. Also, we will be sending out the recording of this after the broadcast, so be sure to keep an eye on your inbox later this afternoon for the link to the recording. So without further ado, I am thrilled to welcome you to Aptean's webcast, Tech Talk. It's time to embrace ERP. We all know that embracing technology is a must for the food and beverage industry in these challenging times. Enterprise Resource Planning Solutions, or ERPs, offer a clear advantage in helping to automate tasks, minimize waste, and boost profit margins. But while the benefits of ERP are clear, selecting and implementing one can be a daunting task for any organization. Today, we're joined by Jack Payne, a seasoned professional in the industry with decades of experience in helping companies select, implement, and maintain ERP systems. This webinar will cover the key points of ERP, best practices, and keys to success. So with that, let's get into the main presentation. Jack, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Hillary, and thanks for the invitation. I always enjoy doing this with Food Industry Executive. And just a little bit of background about me is, as Hillary has stated, I've been working in technology, ERP, food and beverage for quite a number of years. Been working with food and beverage companies for about 30 years and been in the ERP and the technology space for about 40 years before that. If you're not familiar with Aptean, just a little bit about us. Don't want to be a commercial, but we're going to get to the topic today. So we are a global company. We specialize in mission-critical, industry-specific software solutions. You probably have already figured out one of those key industries that we do focus on is food and beverage companies. As a company, we have over 600 million in revenue, over 3,000 employees, and over 1,000 plus food and beverage customers. Many of those customers may be names that you know. Many of those are probably names you've never heard of. So we support growers, processors, manufacturers, and distributors in all segments and all sizes of companies. But let's get into today's topic and talk about embracing ERP, embracing technology for the food and beverage industry, and how it can provide benefits to the company. We'll start out talking about what is ERP. You know, it's a short acronym, long term. We'll talk about what it is. We'll look at some of the industry trends in food and beverage that's shaping what's happening, shaping the challenges, and shaping the solutions and the technology to approach those challenges. What are some of the signs you should be looking for to consider? Should you be replacing or upgrading your systems, whether they're ERP systems or maybe they're not ERP systems? And then as part of that would be talk about how do you focus on your industry requirements so that you select a solution that's good for you, or let's say best for you. Cloud is always a topic that comes up. Should I do this on premise? Should I do it in the cloud? What's the pros and the cons of each of those? And then we'll finish up with, well, what are the type of benefits that a company would typically expect to see from implementing an ERP solution, or maybe upgrading an ERP solution? And then we'll finish up with a question and answer period. Technology, particularly in the software industry, a lot of three-letter acronyms. ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. Its predecessor was MRP, Material Requirement Planning, that grew into ERP. And the term ERP was coined about 30 years ago to talk about how one single solution touched all the main business processes and departments within an organization. But if we kind of look at the evolution that a company would go through from the time a company starts until they maybe go into digital transformation, I think there are four key steps or four key stages. You know, start out, you're a small company, it may be family, maybe 2 or 3 people, it may be 1 or 2 employees. It's probably going to be manual, you know, probably spreadsheets, you might have notebooks, pen and paper. Pretty soon, you're probably going to go into point solutions. And we're all familiar with these. Probably the most common that people know of is QuickBooks. You know, I see QuickBooks in almost every privately owned retail establishment. If you talk to the owner, they're probably using QuickBooks. just to track their accounting for them. But then if you're a manufacturing company or a processor, distributor, and you're small, you're probably going to outgrow QuickBooks pretty fast, and you're going to need to supplement it with point solutions. And at some point in time, you're probably going to grow into needing to tie everything together through an ERP solution. And then once you do that, you may want to actually take that further into digital transformation. And so some pictures to help us understand what this is. As you start out, let's say you're a food manufacturer, you're making bakery products with this. You probably have a small accounting department. They're probably using spreadsheets to start out. You have a salesperson who may be wearing a couple hats, who's managing your customers and taking sales in. You have somebody who's making the products that you're selling, and you have the warehouse that you're storing your ingredients in, storing your finished goods before you ship those out to the customers. And again, that's maybe manual, sheets of paper, spreadsheets, whatever. But as you grow, as you bring more people into the business, you recognize the need for technology. And as I mentioned earlier, probably that first one is some type of accounting system. QuickBooks seems to be a very common one used, not only just in food and beverage, but lots of industries. QuickBooks does give you capabilities to tie purchasing, tie sales to it, some inventory to it. Typically, when you look at food and beverage in terms of things like shelf life and traceability, it typically falls short with that. So you may add on a point solution for the inventory like Fishbowl that manages that. You may have a standalone CRM system. And so you're helping your business manage the business to grow better by having these various point solutions. But at some point in time, what you start finding is there are multiple sources of the truth. If accounting is looking at sales, they may have a different number than sales or customer service looking at it. The warehouse may have a different number than accounting. And so typically you want to, have one system of record, provide streamlined efficiency, provide capability across the system. And this is where an ERP system comes in. It's one single system that ties all these organizations together so that when a sales order is entered through customer service, the warehouse can see it if it needs to be shipped, or production can see it if it needs to be produced. Quality sees what needs to be tested on receipts, on production. Accounting sees all the transactions. Purchasing sees what needs to occur with this. And so this is the basics of what an ERP solution is tying all these individual departments together. And with this, you have real-time information, real-time data. You're not waiting for someone in customer service to share a spreadsheet with you or to email something to you. But as you're recording information in each department, it is visible, again, based upon security of other people in other areas of the business, whether you're all in the same building or whether you're in different buildings, either across the city or across the country or across the globe, just to be able to see this information in real time and basically have one version of the truth or one answer with this. And this is primarily what we're going to be talking about today, is an ERP solution. Now, once you have an ERP solution, you may want to take that to the next step, and digital transformation, where you connect additional capabilities with this. It may be where you connect on the shop floor equipment. If you're baking the products we're talking about, you may want to connect the ovens to it and track temperatures. You may want to track your real-time production rate of how much is being produced on a minute-by-minute basis so you can help improve your efficiency. You may want to have maintenance who's actually tied into this to make sure that all your equipment is running properly, is maintained properly. You may be having a cook or a chef who's developing new products for you, and they may be doing that with spreadsheets and note cards and notebooks. And so they might want to go into a R&D type system, or what we call a product lifecycle management. You may have customers that want to pay you through a payment portal. You may want to tie your sales CRM and your EDI into this, as well as all your transportation. So what you're doing is you're taking that backbone, that hub of ERP, and you're extending it out through other parts of the business to provide that increased capability. So as we look through this is, I think, the vision of where a lot of companies are wanting to go to with all the technology and all the capabilities available to us today. But the real hub of starting here is to have a ERP solution that can provide the foundation to do this. So Hillary, we have a poll question we'd like to ask, and I'd like to turn this back over to you. If you could do this for us.
All right, so I've just launched a poll. If everybody can just go ahead and answer that, I will share the results shortly. Alrighty, gonna keep this open for about 10 more seconds. So go ahead and get your answers in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this. And sharing the results now. So Jack, it does look like we have a split here. 40% said yes, 40% said no, and then 20% said not yet. But we have plans to implement one in the future.
Okay, well, that is very interesting. I don't think I've ever seen one split this evenly. Anytime we've done a poll with this, a lot of times people that are attending this are doing this to learn more about what an ERP system is. But it's interesting that split 40-40 and then 20% are looking to implement one into the future. So hopefully this is good information, it's beneficial for you. I wish this had been my lunch today. I don't think I could have eaten this Dagwood sandwich here in front of us. But as a company, this is our 4th year, 2023 is our 4th year of doing our industry trends, our food and beverage survey. This is something that Appian does not do. We actually commission this to do this. So we've had Reuters News Service do this for us. We've had IDC do this for us. And last year we had B2B International go through and do the survey for us and provide the results to us. And I want to share just a sampling of that with you as we talk about technology. Now, a lot of the things that we found out from our survey were probably not surprises. What we have seen is how trends have changed over the last 4 years. But the biggest trend that we saw occurring is revenue growth. And again, this was being done the end of 2023, so this was comparing 2023 to 2022, is that 74% of the people saw revenue growth in 2022, and 79% are expecting to see more growth in 2023 over 2022. I think this is a combination of two things. One, increased cost typically results in increased revenue, but also increased volume, increased demand. And so there were actually both of those that went together with that. But there were some challenges that we all know about, and we'll cover more of these in just a moment. But the inflation, the higher material costs, the higher cost, even with this, along with consumer demands changing and sometimes having material availability that was not available to us, customers and food and beverage companies were still seeing increase in revenue over the last 2 years, and expected to see more in 2024. Now, the two biggest issues that we saw on the previous screen that companies are having is supply chain disruption and labor or staffing shortages. And you just don't sit around and not address these, but you take action on these. And what we found was that companies that had taken proactive and taken action on this, they saw more revenue growth than companies that had not done this. What I thought was quite interesting to me, that building up inventory, that just in case inventory, whether it's ingredients or packaging or finished goods, that actually resulted in higher revenue growth in 2023. I don't recommend that companies do that, but this was more of a reactive type approach to do it, and it did provide results for companies. Now, when it comes to labor shortages, same thing. But we look at the number one benefit received was from technology to prevent that knowledge loss with that. So again, there are technology and things that can be done to help address the challenges that we're seeing within the food and beverage industry. These were the top concerns that were voiced to us. And again, In the survey, we said you can pick more than one, pick the ones that apply to you and let us know from a ranking with that. And again, not a surprise, the inflation, higher material prices, higher operating costs. This was, consistent with what we saw in 2022, the prior year. But what's interesting is down at the bottom of this, the geopolitical conflict, that was in the top 3 the prior year. Even though I think we're still having conflict, we're having new global conflict. Last year, toward the end of the year, that had reduced down, still a concern. But what came up a notch or two was changing consumer expectations, changing demands, changing habits with that, closely followed by material availability, closely followed by cyber attacks or ransomware attacks or threats with this. So these are the concerns that your peers in the food and beverage industry are saying they have been facing in 2023. And along with that, a little bit different, the challenges that they faced as an organization, as a company. Again, the top 2 kind of match in. Rising cost of materials, shortage of labor, shortage of staffing, and supply chain disruption. And, that's something I hear, as a consumer, if I'm trying to buy an appliance or something with this, and I keep getting the excuse it's a supply chain disruption. Or if I go to a restaurant and they're out of something I order, it's a supply chain disruption with that. I think in some places we've been able to coin that as a standard excuse, excuse number 3, but it is real in food and beverage is supply chain disruption is challenges that companies are facing with this, as well as, quite a number of other challenges. And again, this was something that people that responded to this could pick more than one. Tell us what your top 3 challenges are. So what actions were being done to overcome supply chain disruption? We saw from the previous slide that the one that provided the biggest benefit in terms of revenue was building up inventory, which is down about number 8 in terms of companies that had actually adopted this. And again, the top 8 or 9 are all pretty close in numbers. The one that number 1 was a few percentage points higher than anything else was adding new suppliers. You're finding alternative suppliers, where those were local suppliers or someone else that could help provide those goods in the supply chain. Technology in terms of production scheduling to take better use of your resources and better use of your capacity so that you could be more efficient in how you're planning and how you're doing production. Looking at supply chain contingency plans, and this is another place where technology can come into play, is being able to model and look at different scenarios and see the results of those and have those plans available to you in advance rather than having those plans when you need to come up with one. Another technology area is including forecasting capabilities. And a lot of times I get asked the question, well, what's more important, forecasting of demand or scheduling of production? And I think both of them are very, very equally important. But I think that forecasting comes first. And the reason for this is you can be very efficient as an organization in terms of making the products that you need to make very efficiently with that. But if you're making the wrong products at the wrong time, overall as an organization, you're not being efficient. So I think forecasting is a big piece of being efficient with that. Kind of going along with new suppliers or increasing use of local suppliers. And then number 6, and so we had a 4-way tie for number 3 here, increasing quality checks. It took me a while to really understand this. How did that help you with supply chain disruption? And that's by doing better quality so that the goods that you're coming in are not being rejected and you have a problem with that. So working better with suppliers on supplier certification, putting more of the effort on them to make sure that they provide goods that are meet specifications when they come to you, as well as you doing those quality checks as you're receiving the goods so that you don't find out 2 or 3 days later, or maybe a week later, that there was a problem with what had been received with this. Again, a lot of other things with this. We saw building up inventory was yielded the best results in terms of revenue. We didn't look at what happened to the cost. As you build up inventory, you're going to have additional costs with this as well. But from revenue, that did play a role. What about overcoming labor and shortage skills? And, just like acquiring customers, acquiring an employee, does take time, it does take effort. When you have a employee, you want to retain that employee. And so one of the best ways of doing that is reskilling those employees, upskilling those employees, so they gain value to the organization, they gain value to themselves. And clearly, this was the number one choice that's been chosen by companies in terms of how to combat those skills. Using technology to prevent that knowledge loss, having systems that can provide instructions and directions and to assist with new employees or assist with employees that are not new but taking on other roles in the organization. So you're not losing that tribal knowledge or that experience from that, but also using technology to automate more tasks, whether it's technology within the factory, on the factory floor, automation, or whether it's technology within the office, within sales or planning or counting and inventory, so that more tasks can be done with this. And then quite a number of other creative things to help overcome those labor and shortage skills that we're all seeing in the industry. And then what are companies doing about it? Well, a lot of these, they are already investing in technology. And the top three ones is, first of all, industry regulations and compliance. And what's been interesting to me in the 30 years I've been working in food and beverage is compliance and traceability. 30 years ago, it was more about being able to protect your brand and being able to have a targeted recall in case you needed to do that. And then as we moved into the global food safety initiative, it was more if I wanted to sell to certain companies or certain customers. And then when FSMA came in, I think about 13 years ago now it's mandatory for everybody. It seems like we would have already gotten it correct, but there are new regulations that are continuing to come out. They're more stringent regulations with this. We're seeing customers asking for more regulations, so continue to provide technology to make sure we comply with that. Analyzing information, analyzing data. The best way we can improve our efficiency and reduce our cost is by having, accurate information, having real-time information, so that we can do this. Having information what's going on today, going on this week, not this week that we're looking at what happened back in January that we can't take action on it. And also on those staffing and shortage skills with this. Close behind it is inventory levels. How do you manage your rising costs? And also recognizing that you have outdated or unintegrated systems. Unintegrated systems are those phase two, is those point solutions across the different departments where it's not real time. There's not a single source of truth to this. But then lots of other areas that the companies are investing in technology to be able to address these challenges. Hillary, we finished the technology trends. We're going to start going into looking at reasons to consider. But before that, I'd like to get you to do another poll question for us.
All right, great. I've pulled up the poll, so you are welcome to submit your answers for this one. What is your company's most pressing concern and focus for this year? You can select multiple, or you can select one choice here, it looks like. So go ahead and get your answers in here, and I will again share the results here shortly.
I guess I'm not allowed to choose. Is that correct, Hillary?
It does look like it, but feel free to comment.
Yeah.
All right, just give it a couple more seconds here for people to participate. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this. And Jack, it looks like we had a pretty good split again, but automation did win with 57% saying that that was their most pressing concern or focus for the year. Supply chain resilience, sustainability, and profitability versus rising cost all came in at 14%, and there were no votes this time for maintaining your workforce.
Very interesting. It's interesting to see the high number with automation and everything else tied for second place with that. Very interesting. So let's get into talking about how to recognize you may need to, you've outgrown your solutions. You may need to look at replacing or maybe your first endeavor into ERP. So what are some of these signs and how do you go about evaluating ERP solutions? So hopefully you're not looking like the guy here with the 6 arms who has more than he can do and not enough hours in the day to do this. But some of the signs are increasing complexity. And this doesn't just mean that your products are more complex. It's typically your business is growing. Increased quantity or increased volume of orders that are coming in. Orders from customers, production orders to fill those. Maybe you've grown the number of products. Maybe you've added on additional product lines. One of the examples I like to use in talking about food and beverage is pizzas and frozen pizzas. It has all the good basic food groups in it, but you may be doing that and you may come up with complementary products to that. You may have other pasta entrees that you may want to add. You may have great pizza sauce. You might start selling pizza sauce. So that's where you're increasing the complexity of the additional products. Complexity in your food safety and traceability regulations. Over the years, I've talked with quite a number of companies that told me they have reached a certain level in their business and now they're going after a Walmart, or they're going after a Costco, or they're going after a Cisco or a US Food. And in order to do that, they have to have systems in place that can support that. And so again, that's another sign of complexity. I was actually visiting with a company in the last couple of weeks who's evaluating ERP solutions. This is a 120-year-old family-owned, family multi-rent company, very profitable company. But they actually shared with us that they have kind of reached the ceiling, that they cannot grow any more than with the technology they have, and they need to upgrade that technology, enable for the company to continue to grow to meet their vision with this. So that's one of the reasons to consider looking from an ERP. Not having accurate information, not having timely information. A term I heard many days ago is I thought resonated very well, is information has a shelf life to it, just like the products in food and beverage have a shelf life to it. And the great example, and this was again many years ago, was you typically don't read yesterday's newspaper for the news. You want to read today's newspaper so it is timely. Well, today we have more timely information than printed newspapers. You want one source of the truth. You don't want different departments spending their time comparing information and trying to determine which one has the right information. You want everybody to have the same information. You want to be able to trust that information. And you want to have accurate information, not inaccurate or untimely information. You may be having customer experience or customer journey risk. You may be at risk for losing customers. You may have complaints that have gone up. You may have had orders that you couldn't deliver on time or could deliver in full with this because of complexity. You may find it's difficult to obtain new customers. The example I mentioned earlier with some of the big box stores, or some of the large food service organizations, that you have to have certain systems in place to be able to service those companies. You might be having a problem to respond to new customer demands and new customer requirements. So these are some of the things that typically tell you that your existing system just can't support either where your business is at today or where you want to grow with your business. I was with a customer of ours about 2 years ago. We were doing a presentation similar to this at an industry trade show that we were at. And he actually brought up the next slide. And he said, this is what my desk looked like before we implemented an ERP solution. We had paper, we had spreadsheets, we had point solutions like for accounting and sales, but everybody was buried in paper. And by the time you got to yesterday's information, it was probably a week from now. He says, a year after we implemented the system and everybody was using it and seeing all the benefits, all the paper went away from this. So this is another sign that you may need to be looking for new systems. So now you've come to that realization to, let's look for new systems, let's evaluate ERP solutions. So how do you do that? So just like you're going to do any type of evaluation, you first of all get that list of here are the ones I want to consider. It may be that you're looking for appliances, and maybe you're looking for a new vehicle. I started to say automobile, but you know, one of those may be, do you want a truck? Do you want an SUV? Do you want a sports car? Do you want a sedan? So, you know, once you kind of figure out that first thing, you then say, well, what are the things that I want to do from that? And so this is where I'll say you do your homework first. You know, you need to not look at just where your company is at today. You need to really understand the strategic vision and goals of the company. So if this is a project that has been assigned to either controller or control IT, or maybe joint assigned to control and IT, whoever it's assigned to, you know, it needs to make sure that have that clear vision from the leadership of the company, what the vision and goals are. And also let's try to understand those challenges to meet those goals and meet that success with that. And really take into consider the future state of the business and future business processes. One of the things that you don't want to do is to replicate your existing systems. I've gone into companies and they've shared with me that they selected an ERP system 4 or 5 years ago, but it just wasn't giving them the benefits that they were expecting to get. And as I talked through with them and tried to understand this, what I found out from them was all they did was use new technology to replicate old business processes. They didn't really relook at their business. It doesn't mean that you need to change every business process, but you need to examine your business processes and consider what those need to be with that. Another company shared with me that every time that they create an invoice for a customer, they actually print that invoice out and they go do something with it. I go, wait a minute, why are you printing that out? And the only thing they could tell me is because this is how I was trained to do this 10 years ago, and nobody ever looked and changed the business process. So those are the things you want to examine, and you want to look at where you want to go to a company. The next two, I think, are just really critical. Is what are those key business requirements to success? And once you figure those out, what are the critical features you need to meet those that success? So let's say you're looking to purchase an automobile and you've narrowed it down that you want to get an SUV. You don't go out and say, well, does it have wheels and tires on it? And does it have doors? And does it have a steering wheel? And all these things that you expect an SUV to have in it, because those are just things that are part of it. Well, ERP solutions have matured to that point. But there are a lot of those features like a general ledger, and I have debits and credits, and I can pay bills with it, and I can invoice customers with it, and I can receive cash. But there may be unique things about that, particularly on receiving cash with customers in the food and beverage industry, of how they take credits with that, and how you manage those credits and validate those against maybe promotions that you've had. So that's why I talk about those critical features. So define that list. You know, is that list 10? Is that list 50? Not sure where it is for each company, but don't have that 5,000 list of generic things that 4,500 of them every year ERP system is going to do, because that's just what an ERP system does. Really focus on what's critical to your success and where you want to go as a business. Once that's been determined, and you know, there's typically an evaluation team that gets assigned to this. So, you know, we typically get somebody from sales and somebody from accounting, somebody from purchasing and manufacturing and quality. So rather than just say, hey, come help us look at this ERP systems that we're considering, the homework needs to be reviewed with them. They need to understand, you know, what are the strategic vision from the leadership of the business, and what are the key things that we're looking for, so that everybody's on board, knowing where the business is going and what we need to look for with that. Again, my opinion is you should consider industry-based ERP solutions that have success in food and beverage. And the key takeaways in a moment, I'll have some examples as to why. Well, I think that's important to be considered in your evaluation. But also, in addition to the software or the solution, is also the implementation process. You know, looking at how you're going to start using that system. How are you going to transition from what you're doing today to the new system? How are the users going to use it? How are you going to get there? So let's say you go out and buy an SUV. If you don't know how to drive it, you know, it just sits in your garage. You can't do anything with it. That's like an ERP system. You have to know how it's going to be implemented. And I think this is just as important to consider as part of the evaluation process as the solution itself. Now, once you've done this, there are going to be, you know, certain requirements that we've talked about. And there are 5 or 6 areas that we typically see in food and beverage that are typically key requirements with this. And again, this is going to change a little bit for every company. But typically we see, you know, regulatory quality requirements, you know, full backward, forward traceability, recall. Typically food safety, unless you have some system today that's tracking food safety and compliance, not just quality, but food safety. Typically you want this built into your ERP, so you have all your traceability and food safety as part of it, as well as your quality test, as well as supplier certifications, and then quality all the way from receipt to shipment, the ability to hold inventory on a quality hold, it failed quality to put it in a reject status. So all these are typical things that most companies would include in food and beverage. Inventory, this can be more complex depending upon the company, but you know, everybody has requirements for managing shelf life, managing lot control, the traceability of this. Depending upon the industry, you may need multiple units of measure. You may need catch weight. You may need net weight with that. You may have variable ingredients that produces a consistent product. You may be producing orange juice, and you may be getting oranges from different parts of the world, and those oranges may vary, but you have a consistent product you make. Allergens is also something very important, is managing the allergens, and what allergens in the ingredients you're buying, what allergens are allowed, what allergens are not permitted, how do you keep from having cross-contamination both in warehousing and in production from changeovers. Typically, we see that in many organizations. And then production requirements. You know, most times a bill of material from a discrete type company is, you know, to build a quantity of one, you know, one computer, one this or one that, but we're not building, you know, one box of chips or one bag of cookies or one donut, or we're not making one steak, whatever with this. So we need those batching capabilities. And then we get into certain areas where it's typically we see it in the dairy, the protein is, we call it input based. So you're producing product yields coming out based upon what comes in, and you may be producing co-products and broth products that have value, and you need to manage those. And you want to track your yields. Earlier this week, I was with a company. The giveaway was a very important topic. They're producing a bakery product. As I was going through the factory a few weeks ago, at the end of the process, they have a checkware that's checking every individual finished good item coming across. And as the run was going that day, I was noticing about a 6 or 7% variance in the weight of each one of those individual items. And so later we went back and we talked about that. And they said, yes, we know we're having this variance, but we don't know where it's coming from. We have a 4 or 5 step process to produce this finished product that we're coming through. We know at the end that we're seeing this variance in this giveaway, but we don't know how we're tracking it. And so that became a key requirement for them, is really putting controls in place and having the technology to give them insight as to where that giveaway is coming. Costing gets very complex as well, particularly what's happening in the industry, whether you want to do a standard cost or a weighted average cost or an actual cost, but also being able to see what your true cost is based upon the actual lots that were used with this. And also to be able to do what if costing and simulation costing, that, you know, what if this commodity goes up, or what if this price changes? How does that affect our costs? How does that affect our margins that we get on this? And then kind of finishing up sales and promotion management. There's some very complex pricing that goes in food and beverage. There's even more complex marketing programs and promotions. And rather than having these on spreadsheets and knowing that allowances and rebates and broker fees and all that you can be paying those out, we want to basically accrue for those at the time of the sale so that we don't get a surprise 3 months later that we were less profitable than we expected to be with it. So again, depending upon exactly what you're doing, you know, these may be things that you consider as critical key industries in your business. I always get the question about, Well, cloud, what's the advantages, what's the pros and cons of cloud versus ERP? And I thought this was just very interesting. So over the last 3 years, from 2021 through 2023, our survey results have brought in 4 stages. Are you on premise without any plans to move? Are you thinking about moving to the cloud? Have you made that decision and you're in the process of moving to it, or have you moved to the cloud? In the last 3 years, going from left to right, we've seen, 3 times as many people have moved to the cloud in the last 3 years, but also the big one is people in the process of moving to the cloud, 33%. So my prediction based upon this information is in 2024 survey, we'll see 50%, and give or take, food and beverage companies have now made that journey. They've made that move into the cloud as part of giving them the infrastructure, giving them the capabilities that they need. Whether it's a new implementation, whether it's your first ERP, or maybe some migration of your existing system into the cloud with that is that high number. But the benefit or the reason, well, why are companies doing that? We all hear about cyber attacks. We hear about it in the food and beverage industry. We hear about it in other areas. There have been some very high profile ones in the food and beverage with some large companies over the last couple of years we all know about. Increasing mobility for workers, for users, having access to information, access to data, easier access to this. Sustainability, which is important in food and beverage companies. Being able to innovate faster, more efficiently, being able to better integrate systems with this. Now, when you look at the drivers for this, as you take advantage of the drivers, you should expect to see benefits from this. And this is where our survey also said, well, tell us about your revenue growth and tell us about your profit growth. And it was compared with companies that moved to the cloud, and that 24% of those companies, that 75% that not moved to the cloud yet. And across the board is revenue growth was about 2% greater and profit growth was about 2% greater. And people ask me, well, why does this occur? Well, I think it occurs because you can focus on your business. You have that access to information. Typically with cloud-based solutions, you're staying current on technology, current on capabilities that are needed within your industry. You're not having to supplement with much spreadsheet. So it gives you the ability to grow your business and to improve your business to see these kind of results with this. But whether you're implementing on premise or on cloud with this, what are the type of benefits the ERP brings to the table with this? And again, this came from our surveys with this, looking at business areas of business processes, going from that stage 1, stage 2, now to ERP, across the board, 75% or greater improvement in processes in the areas that we've all been challenged with over the last 3 years in terms of supply chain disruption, procurement of products, procurement ingredients, food safety and quality. These are the ones that had the highest improvement with this. Also add to this was companies that had moved from on-premise to cloud saw on average about a 15% increase over these numbers as well from this. And so when you're looking and evaluating solutions and you probably see features, say, yes, this is going to help me better manage my inventory, better manage my shelf life. This is going to help me better manage those promotions and the rebates, and I can do better scheduling with this. And we're going to see increased efficiency, but how does that relate to the bottom line to the company, to the person that signed the check? What does it mean to them? It's not just a shiny new toy, but how is it going to improve the business? So this is where we look at what we have put together as key value drivers. And from years of experience working with our customers, going through surveys of this, working with third-party consultants who've done surveys on ERP solutions, we've boiled it down into these 4 broad categories. What's the efficiency improvements to the company? 2 big areas in that is just overall efficiency. So as you grow, you can grow without adding headcount. As you have attrition, as being able to be efficient, you can cover that without attrition. And also, depending upon overtime that you're doing today, is being able to do those overtimes are big key areas for efficiency. Inventory. One of the big areas with that is better managing your inventory, better turning your inventory. Typically, you can reduce that just in case of that safety stock. But one of the bigger areas that we find is inventory write-offs. By having better control of your shelf life and expiration and using directed picking in ingredients as well as in shipping to customers, is you can reduce that write-off. You have more accurate inventories. By having better planning tools in place and looking at analysis of your purchasing, you can typically work with your suppliers and typically get better pricing. The giveaway example I was talking about just a few moments ago, being able to better track your yields and the giveaway and being able to address that all leads to reduced inventory requirements and also better pricing. So big numbers there can come in. Revenue side, being able to increase revenue and also reducing revenue leakage. An easy way to increase revenue is being able to ship in full to your customers. So not having those shorts, but being able to not lose that revenue that you've already taken orders for, but also by being more efficient in the factory, being more efficient in sales, that you open up capacity to take more orders, to increase the revenue and increase through better customer service. But also we want to prevent that revenue leakage. Penalties, fines from customers that you may have received for product without required shelf life for them, or not shipping on time, or shipping too early, or having incorrect quantities, or having the invoice incorrect. Those are all fines and penalties that systems like this can help you reduce. Also, better control over your deductions and promotions so that you're not overpaying those areas of revenue leakage. And so as you look at these numbers together and pull this together, these now become, here are financial reasons for the business to be able to improve and the results they're expecting to see from this. So as we getting toward the end of this, key takeaways. Why do I think you should consider a food and beverage solution rather than a generic solution? Well, some of those requirements went to looking at giveaway, looking at yields, managing promotions, managing your shelf life better, the traceability. If you look at a generic solution, you might require customizations to do some of those. It might require spreadsheets. It might require workarounds. So you eliminate all this off the bat from this. This results in reduced implementation scope and timeline, which means you start getting to benefit those results sooner. You can focus on your business. You can focus on how you're going to use the system and use best practices in the industry to do this. Also means that your implementation team is going to come in with experience in a food and beverage, and most likely experience in your specific vertical with this. But also ongoing support for future releases as new regulations come out, FSMA regulations, or maybe industry regulations and trading with other companies, to be able to respond and support those industry regulations and future releases, not having to wait for those or have to do customizations or workaround in the meantime. So Hurley, I appreciate you the invitation to share this information with you, and I think we have a few minutes left for questions and answers. So let me turn it back over to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jack. First question we have here is going to be, my company has used QuickBooks for years. Why should we be considering an ERP as a replacement? And if we do, can we still keep QuickBooks?
So, that is a question I've heard before. And, QuickBooks is something that it's a system that's used in many places. A lot of accountants really like QuickBooks. And that's typically where the question comes from, and not to downplay the role and importance of accountants, but I think, part of it needs to look at the overall organization. But yes, you could probably implement parts of an ERP solution. You could probably implement sales and inventory and purchasing and production without accounting, but then use QuickBooks for that. But what you're doing is you're losing a lot of the efficiencies that you're gaining from an ERP solution. You have to build integrations, connecting all the financial transactions that occur to accounting, or either you have to do that manually through spreadsheets. And again, you start having the risk of multiple answers of the truth and which one's accurate with this. So while I think, at first blush, it does say, oh, we like QuickBooks, it works for us in an accounting standpoint. I think, companies have to look more holistically at, well, where's the business going? And what do we need to support that, now and into the future?
All right, thank you. Next question we have here is, why is an industry-specific ERP better than a generic one?
So hopefully I covered that earlier, but maybe that question came in as I was talking. But I think, when you start looking at that industry-specific solution, you're going to see it has the features that you need. So again, using the analogy of going to buy a vehicle, maybe what I really want is a SUV, but maybe I buy a pickup because a pickup has an extra seat, but then I convert the back of that pickup bed to an SUV. So I've customized or I've modified that truck to do not as good as what an SUV can do. I kind of equate that to the same as looking at ERP solutions. If I buy a generic ERP solution, yeah, it's going to do the basics. They all do. It's going to do accounting. It's going to do sales. It's going to do purchasing. It's going to do manufacturing. Can it do the planning that I need? Can it take into consideration allergens as I'm scheduling? Can it manage my inventory by shelf life with this? So all those various things, does a generic solution have those capabilities in it, as well as if it has a subset of some of those solutions, as new requirements and new features come out into the future for food and beverage industry, are you going to have to wait? And is it going to be a year, 2 years, or 3 years to either build that as a customization and for that to catch up with that? So again, I think if you say we're in the food and beverage industry, these are our key requirements with this. If you can find the right solution that fits for you, I think that's better to do that from a industry specific solution.
All right, thank you. Last question we have here is, we have an on-premise ERP currently. Why should we consider moving to the cloud?
So I think there are a lot of good reasons for that. We have worked with a number of our customers over the last 4 years. And even before the pandemic, there was quite a growing interest in cloud and what that could offer and the benefits it could bring to an organization. I think the pandemic, with a lot of the struggles and challenges that companies had, that actually kind of highlighted the reasons that companies would start considering it. But then we look at the successes that companies have had with that. Unfortunately, I've talked with too many companies that have had on-premise systems that had a ransomware or got attacked. I've talked with companies that, let's say, had this and it was a minor inconvenience for a couple of days or over a weekend. I've talked with companies that lost 3 and 4 weeks worth of production because of this. It seems to me like the average is kind of the 2-week period of disruption to the business. And when you look at, what's the cost to the business in that 2-week disruption, what's the cost to get back to where you're at, is a short-term cost, but you also look at, well, what's the cost to my reputation in the industry? What's my cost if customers lose faith in me and they may go somewhere else, and in the long term, I may lose those customers. That's another big reason. But then I think some of the results that we've seen from companies that have made that, and we're now into that, that majority of companies moving to the cloud, is the benefits they're seeing, having better information, being able to increase their revenue, being able to manage their costs better and have greater margins with that. These, I think, are the business benefits that go on with the technology benefits. And, these are things that cloud actually unlocks or enables the company to do from that. So very much I'm a proponent for cloud in terms of the business benefits it can bring to the business.
All right, thanks, Jack. That is a wrap on questions. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And Jack, thanks again for another excellent presentation. Keep an eye on your inbox for the recording of today's event and have a wonderful rest of your day.